Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I am your host, Chris Gargano, and for episode 109, we are talking about getting unstuck. That is our problem, and we will provide you some solutions today. You came to the right podcast. Our guest, Tom Cox, is the CEO of Vertical Motion, a company founded in 2023. He's an executive coach. Let's go back to you for a second. You've been at the business for a while, right? Do you get an MBA? Do you hire an executive coach? Do you do nothing and hope for the best? Everyone at some point in their career usually faces a time where they are stuck. Tom Cox will take you through his methodology, through his own story. He was in the military. He was a corporate leader. He is a cancer survivor. You have to hear his inspirational story. I'm so glad that we held this podcast. We taped it a number of months ago, but it is perfect for this time of year, Christmas Eve, in the holidays, the center of it all, when we're with family, friends to share inspirational stories. Tom Cox has one now, and we waste no time getting to it. Tom Cox on Keep the Line Moving. Tom, it is great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on. And let's start with where I start with a lot of guests. Tell us what you do on a daily basis, please.
Sure. It's good to see you, Chris. So I am an executive career coach. What I do is I help people go from the mid-career level, so like manager, maybe junior director, up to vice president and C-suite and beyond. There's a bunch of mindset shifts and skills that you need to stack in order to move to that level. And just being a better manager or being a better employee isn't enough. So I help people through that process.
All right, that is fantastic. Now, we've gotten to know one another through our mutual friend, who we both like very much, Dr. Dan Kaufman. And in getting to know you and understanding you better, it's clear you're very passionate about this. And you know we're in the same field, right? We both have our reasons for starting our own businesses. What is your driving motivation? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to help these mid-level leaders get to the next level?
Yeah, great question. So there's a little bit to this answer. I had always enjoyed coaching and mentoring people, but that was never really part of my job. My job was usually building a company or doing sales. And in 2022, I got sick with leukemia, and you know, it got kind of dicey for a minute, and I was lying there in bed like, wow, did I live a good life? Was I good to my wife? Was I good to my kids? That kind of thing. And the answers to those questions were yes, but I felt really unfulfilled in my career and like I had left something on the table. So I thought a lot about that. And I went through an exercise that I now take my clients through. And the exercise basically helps you understand your life purpose. And for me, what I found after doing a bunch of introspection work was that my life purpose is to teach leadership. I didn't have someone to teach me leadership when I was young. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It wasn't until I joined the Army that I understood the concept of leadership at all. And then many years later, I wound up leading companies and I learned how to lead them poorly before I learned how to lead them better. And what I want to do is help build the next generation of leaders, business leaders in our country. So I want to teach a generation of authentic, empathetic, and audacious people how to become great business leaders so that they can put not just shareholders' values at first, but also the values of the customers and the employees and even the vendors and the planet and everything else. So that's my long answer to that question.
You articulated that perfectly. So in 2022, your life changed. You get diagnosed with leukemia, and now you're reflecting and thinking, how have I been as a person, a father, a husband? And then secondarily, how have I been as a professional? Have I been fulfilled in my career? So, Tom, what do you come away with? What did that self evaluation and introspection about your work, what did it reveal?
It revealed that while I did put the right emphasis and focus on being a good husband, being a good father, as best as I could, nobody's perfect, but I really did put those things first in my life. But beyond that, how I made money never really felt comfortable to me. How I went through the world with my skills and gifts. I always felt like I was operating in a skill that I'm good at, but I don't love. And this exercise that I went through helped me ask 4 questions about what I do. Um, what do I love? What am I good at? What can I be paid for? And what does the world need? Right. And so as I went through those questions, it got really hard for me to say the world needs the things that I had been selling for 10, 15 years. And it really wasn't something that I loved anymore. I had fallen out of love with my industry a long time ago and didn't really enjoy it, but I didn't know what else to do. And so it was easier to just keep the inertia of my career moving. Cancer gave me a 6-month break from my career. And I don't want to say cancer was a good thing, but never waste a crisis. Those 6 months were transformational for me. It helped me really dive into this introspective work and come out with a sense that, like, I'm meant to do more than just sell these things, right? And that more is really designed to help kind of fill the hole that I had, earlier in my life, earlier in my career, right? So no father figure growing up, not a lot of leadership, experience. Didn't The first CEO I ever met, I didn't meet that person until I was 26. So, like, I have never met an executive, let alone understood how they think. So I wanted to kind of fill that void for the next generation. And so I started putting that process together. I brought in 2 clients. They both got promoted within 90 days. And I was like, okay, I think I've got something here.
So you grow up not observing a lot of leadership. You're not seeing it, you're not living it, right? And you mentioned your military background, so you're now infused with a ton of leadership there, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong. And then you get into the corporate world. You meet your first CEO at 26 years old. Was it then that you started to study the behaviors of leaders? Was there a certain point when you started to observe, or was this in your introspection process that you became a student of leadership?
Yeah, great question. I remember being, I think I was 21 or 22, and I was in the Army and I was going through a year's worth of training on satellite technology. And I remember sitting outside one night on my own, like 2 in the morning, and just kind of like disappointed with where I was in life. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to be the best at whatever it is that I do. I'm going to figure out what that looks like, and I'm just going to go be the best at that. And for at the time, that was satellite control, flying satellites for the military. And I became one of the best satellite controllers in the world. As soon as I did, I got really bored with it. And then I was looking for a way out to do something else. I wanted to go be the best at something else. And that led to a series of career moves that did ultimately make me the best of, I was one of the best technicians. Then I was one of the best engineers. Then I was one of the best system engineers. And at some point, I got to a point where, like, I could be the best at what I did, but there were still business people making decisions that didn't make any sense to me. And that's when I started to think about, what is it about what I'm doing? Like, I really believed in the meritocracy of, like, if you're the best at what you do, you should move up. It didn't occur to me that promotions are not rewards for success at your level. Promotions are there for when your leadership team thinks that you'll do well at the next level. And that mindset, I was missing that. I didn't understand it. So what I started doing was, I didn't understand the business decisions that were being made in the companies that I worked for. So I started absorbing business information. I went and got a degree in business. I went and got an MBA. I went and listened to every business podcast, bought all these business books that you see behind me, and just absorbed voraciously thoughts and ideas and concepts about business. And I remember saying, like, I think I'm better at business than the people I'm working for. It turns out I wasn't. But the point is that it was like, I decided, okay, well, I'm going to be the best at business now. And that led to me building a startup. And quite honestly, that first startup, we did okay, but not great. And I burned out. And it was the first time in my life that I had reached a point where, all right, I am not the best and I'm not the best yet. And it became this thing that I felt like I had to get over, that I had to continue to become the best of something. And while I still agree that I should continue to grow, that was where like I realized that there are people who know how to lead. Um, I didn't know what an executive coach was until 2017. And when I met one and worked with one, it was like, wow, she has made me so much better as a leader than I was without her help. And that opened my eyes to the realization that you can get a lot better at something if you work with a coach to help you get there. Like that makes sense in sports, but I didn't see the analogy in business until much later in my career.
There is so much here to follow up on, and I love it. All right. So I hired personally an executive coach in 2021, and I was with him for a couple of years. He was tremendous. He was like my personal Yoda. All that wisdom and guidance that he gave me, he made my life richer because of that relationship. So I support you 100% in what you're doing. Here's what I want to follow up on. You said that you studied business. You became, in your words, voracious about studying. So you said, I want to be better. I want to be better than the people that are leading me, which makes sense. You saw a lot of weaknesses in their leadership styles. I was the same way. I always felt that people that led me needed to care. They needed to care about me as a human being more so than just doing a job or a position, right? They needed to care about people. So I doubled down and studied that. That's when I studied, and now I teach. It's empathy, transparency, communication, being open, seeing how you can get better. So my question to you is this, Tom. What are you seeing now in your role and the people that you coach? Where does your bias or your education or your experience help you in guiding those that you coach?
There are two ways to the top. And the first way is by being a great leader, to be someone that people look up to and want to work with and want to see succeed, right? So a leader doesn't move up, they are pulled up. They are like a high tide rises all boats, and great leaders are like the tide coming in. And that's what I focus on. I help people who are authentic, empathetic, and audacious become great leaders. And that is the way to the top that I teach. There's a second path to the top, and we're all aware of it. This is where, unfortunately, a lot of people use manipulation, deceit. They're selfish, self focused, self directed. They move up to, and it's unfortunate. And so one of the things that I try to do is I teach people who would be great leaders but don't have the confidence to do that. I teach them the understanding that if they don't lead, those manipulators will. And so if you think about it this way, we all have, those of us who are authentic, empathetic, and audacious leaders, we have a mandate, if you take a step back and think about it, to become great leaders. Because if we don't, it will leave people to be led by poor leaders. So I kind of turn around in the minds of the people that I work with that like to put yourself out there and to become, the leader that you can is actually not just beneficial to yourself and your family, but also to the people who would work for you. That was what, when I figured that out, and I really figured that out during my journey during leukemia, that mindset shift really helped me also get comfortable with putting myself out there. Like I didn't like being on social media. I didn't like, putting myself out there for people to ridicule. And I've done it, and it's been fantastic for the most part. But I did it because not because I want to be on camera. I did it because I want people to see an example of who they could be in me.
All right, Tom, I'm going to dissect this because I love what you stand for and I love where you're going with this. Look, logically speaking, why would someone in a senior leadership position promote somebody who's manipulative, selfish, arrogant, cruel? maybe gets the job done, quote unquote, but leaves a path of destruction behind them. Tom, why does this happen?
I think there's two reasons, and it's one of them is the same reason people wind up in abusive relationships. It's because the manipulators are very good at manipulating the people they want to manipulate in the ways that they want to be manipulated. So I think, first and foremost, the answer is that, like, even I have hired narcissists not knowing what they were. I've hired poorly because, and I can now go back and recall every single tactic used, like love bombing and all of the tactics that manipulative people use to manipulate other people. And the other thing here, Chris, the second part of this is that, quite honestly, when you let shareholders drive the decisions of an organization, they don't give a shit who's in charge. They don't care about the culture. They care about the quarterly result. So, like, right now we have this, like, absence of leadership because what shareholders have done, primarily in publicly traded companies and in private equity companies as well, they have aligned the incentives of the C-suite to the shareholders. So a C-suite executive cares very much about the stock performance because they get more shares and the shares are worth more. And that's how they make millions and millions of dollars. So you have CEOs and C-suite executives acting on behalf of the shareholders only. And when you do that, you open up the window for people who are selfish to become leaders. Because when they're selfish, but their interests are aligned with the shareholders care not how they treat other people. They care not, if they're a manipulative person or not. They care that they drive shareholder value.
I've heard that. You've heard that. We've all heard this, that the people writing the checks just want to get down to the quarterly earnings. We all get that. But isn't there another side? And obviously, that's what you're saying. That's what your business is built on, as is mine. That is, you take a different approach. If you connect with your people, empower them, and work to understand them, then you could get them to do great things. And some people might roll their eyes that I'm going about it in the soft skill discussion, right? I don't care. And I know you don't, because I know if you connect with people, they could do better work, which gets everyone aligned. And people want to come to work. And I know some leaders in the selfish camp would say that's Pollyannic. It's a Pollyannic approach. Listen, we've all been around, right? And you and I have been around, and we know the difference between, false optimism or too much positivity. But what actually works is connecting with people. Tom, what do you think?
Well, first of all, leadership is not a soft skill. I firmly believe leadership is the skill.
Right.
If you are director or above, yes, you can say it's a soft skill in that you're not learning JavaScript or something like that. But when you get to be a manager or a director or a vice president or the CEO, leadership is the most important skill that you need to have in order to be successful at those levels. So to your point, there's several ways to move up, but at the end of the day, the ones that move up and have the most value created around them are the people who lead themselves, they lead their teams, they grow in leadership, they continuously lift their own lid. Manipulators don't lift their lid the same way as leaders do, because leaders, we never feel like we've quite figured it out. And that's what you want. You want someone who is perfecting their craft in leadership. So if anyone in your audience doesn't feel like, leadership is a hard skill, I will debate that with you for days, because at the end of the day, I have seen myself, when you put authentic, empathetic, audacious people in charge of something and they have the confidence to do that, great things always happen without fail. When you put a manipulator in that same situation, great things might happen for that manipulator, but very rarely for anyone else.
You're getting me fired up today, Tom. And I like this because it's the passion behind helping leaders and helping folks to understand, right? Standing up for something. and you have a beautiful mission statement. So tell us about your company. Let's do some role playing here. So I come to you, I'm a director, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I've been at the company 6, 7 years, but I have to figure myself out. I'm having a third child, the mortgage is going up, whatever the case may be personally. I need to know what this company thinks of me. How can you help that person? What is your process?
Yeah, great question. I'll just tell you that I think right now we have about maybe 60 people in the program that are going through this, and that number changes depending on who's in and who's completed it. But generally speaking, the people coming in are between like age 32 and 55, and they have hit that point in their career where they're 10, 20 years into their career, somewhere in that range. And what was working for them to get promoted just doesn't seem to work anymore. And there becomes like, it feels like there's this glass ceiling. They're not quite getting callbacks on resumes that they put out. Their boss isn't real interested in having a conversation about promotion, and things just kind of feel stagnant. They can move laterally sometimes to other companies or other organizations doing about the same job, but they don't seem to move up. And that is what we help with. We help people figure out what's holding them down. There's a lot of things that people don't know that they don't know. So, for example, there are 4 levels to every organization, whether it's a startup or Walmart. Every organization in the world has 4 levels. Individual contributors are at the bottom. They're the ones who do the things, right? Managers are next. Managers manage individual contributors and the resources of the organization. And that can be vehicles or inventory or what have you, right? The third layer is the one that most people don't really understand well, and that's the executive level. And I'll come back to that. The fourth level is ownership. And ownership can be something that's very much in your face or not, depending on the size of the company. But let me talk about the executive level, because at the executive level, you're not a manager. You do manage managers, but that's like 10% of what you do. Executives have responsibilities that are very different, and we teach that to our clients. So, for example, managers look inward towards an organization to make sure that it's working correctly. Executives look outwards to make sure that that machine should even exist, make sure that that machine is making the right things, make sure that that machine is ready for what's coming in the future, change, growth, destruction, whatever, right? Executives are looking outward, managers are looking inward. Executives are thinking in the future, managers are looking at past performance, right? So like you can see these different perspectives and ways of looking at the world, but that third layer is the one that people understood the transition from individual contributor to manager. They don't understand manager to executive as well. And quite honestly, it's just not really taught. There's not a lot out there on that transformation. A lot of people think they can get it from an MBA, and then they go through an MBA and they're woefully disappointed at the fact that the MBA just basically taught them business basics and not really like how to be an executive. There is no, as far as I can tell, executive school. So that's why we created it.
That's awesome. Okay, let's get back to you. Why do you think you fell out of love with your job, your profession, prior to having leukemia in 2022? You made an interesting comment, and I wanted to revisit it here before we go. Why did you fall out of love? Can you explain that?
Yeah, yeah, I can. When I was 17, I joined the Army, and I was grateful for the Army to give me the opportunity to serve. It pulled me up out of, East Baltimore City, where like all of my friends were working at either General Motors or Allison Transmissions, right? The Seagirt Marine Terminal. That's where everybody was going. And the Army gave me a path up and out. And I loved serving my country. I worked at the NSA during 9/11. Um, I was involved in helping, with that aftermath and did a lot of things. And back then, I really believed in what I was doing. Somewhere around 2007, I started to fall out of love with the defense industry and didn't really feel like the wars that we were fighting were the wars that we should be fighting. And too many of my friends were coming home horizontal. And I started to question like my own morals and beliefs and ethics. And I did try to leave the defense industry twice, and I couldn't. I left, and then invariably in a couple of years I came back, and then I left again, and invariably in a couple of years later I came back. And around 2018, I resigned myself to the fact that I was just going to spend the rest of my life in this career that I don't really necessarily believe in the mission anymore. And it wasn't until leukemia that I was able to look myself in the mirror and say, like, this isn't you. This isn't who you are. Right. And I want to be very clear. I am a very proud veteran. I am very proud of this country. I'll stand on the watch anytime I'm asked. I want to be clear about that. It just, for me, I felt like I should be doing more um, to help people, not to help build systems like hypersonic missiles and things like that. I wanted to go do something that created joy and love and value. And that is something that I always just kind of put in a box after 2018 and said, like, well, that's maybe you can do that in retirement, Tom. In the meantime, go do your job. And, so I got very stoic about it. And then in 2022, going through cancer, I realized that I'm not lighting myself up. I'm leaving a whole bunch on the table. I'm not bringing my whole self to something. With this coaching business, I bring my whole self and I get so engaged and fired up. I have a call with a client, and on the other side of that call, I have more energy. Chris, I never had a job where I would go into a meeting, and on the other side of that meeting, I have more energy because everything I did was draining. It was exhausting. And I think a lot of us understand that feeling of like, oh my God, another Zoom call with these people. When I work with clients, it is just the opposite. And so, like, I know for a fact I'm in exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And if I could go back to myself in 2018 and let that version of me feel this feeling, I would have been doing this back then too.
And that is why I asked the question. And I respect and appreciate the fact that you answered it as transparently as you did. I asked the question because there are people out there that have fallen out of love with their job. They're stuck, or they perceive that they're stuck, and they're trying to figure it out for themselves. And it's just to say, do that introspection. What lights you up? Are you in the right place? Do you need to make a change? You had the courage to do it. I did it. Other people have done it. If it's not lighting you up, you've got to pay attention, because we only have a short time on this planet, right, Tom? And we want to make sure we're doing what's true to that, true to our core. All right. Are you ready for the all-star round? Here we go.
Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. How do you deal with adversity?
Usually head on. I try to face adversity as close to the eyes as I possibly can and just try to get through it as best I can.
What gives you fuel?
Community, through friends, through people. That's my energy, is when I see happy people. That lights me up.
Never give up. What does that mean to you?
Fall down 7 times, stand up 8th time. That fortune cookie is on my desk.
All right, this question's right up your alley. The value of collaboration. What does that mean?
Invaluable. It's the most important thing in everything we do.
Okay, hiring people. What do you look for in an ideal candidate?
They're easy for me to understand their way of thinking, which can be different than mine. I love diversity of opinion so long as I understand it. Um, Empathy. They need to understand how to communicate with someone else. And they need to have the ability to understand someone else's feelings. How communication is what the listener does. And then audacity. And audacity is about, having the gumption to go do something great because it should be done.
In one sentence, describe yourself as a leader.
I believe that I am an authentic, empathetic, and audacious person, and I want to help create that in other people as well.
And the last one, what is the difference between a manager and a leader?
So a manager does the right things. I'm sorry, the manager does things right, but the leader decides what the right things to do are.
Tom, this has been fantastic. I so appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much. Talk about a passionate conversation. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Chris. I love talking with you.
And we thank Tom very much for being on the show. I have two main takeaways from today's show. Number one, Tom asked himself 4 questions during that introspective time that he shared with us. They are as follows. You can use these to get unstuck yourself. Number one, what do I love? Number 2, what can I be paid for? Number 3, what am I good at? And number 4, what does the world need? Those questions and answers helped Tom arrive where he is now, an executive coach, helping people like you listening to this podcast, right? My second takeaway is fascinating the way Tom put it. I've never heard it put this way, and I really appreciate it. If you're a leader who is authentic, you care about people, you empower people, you listen, it is your responsibility to continue leading, to work hard to lead, to continue your career, whether that is an MBA, an executive coach, or whatever that may be. It's worth it because you're going to push aside those that are selfish, deceitful, manipulative, that do all those negative things that we all complain about and don't understand. We have to push them aside. I'm being harsh here in my words just to make a point because we don't want anyone to be pushed aside. Obviously, we want to push them perhaps into education and wanting to get better themselves. But if you're already there, continue your journey. You heard Tom. I say it on this podcast all the time, as well as a lot of other guests say it. If you're doing it right and you're caring about people, and it might be going a little bit slower for you in your journey, it's worth it. The world needs you. Continue to lead and be kind, respectful, and you could still get the numbers, the metrics, the sales, whatever the KPIs are. You can do it. All right. Hopefully, this was an inspirational episode for you here. And thank you very much, everybody. Subscribe, continue to recommend the podcast, hit the thumbs up. You know, we love it. You know, we appreciate it. We'll see you next week for the last episode of 2024 on Keep the Line Moving. Every week, you hear guests on this podcast talk about some of their biggest leadership challenges. As a leader, you want to make an impact on those you lead and reach your organization's goals, while also optimizing your time management. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, we could all use some help. This is what we focus on with our group and individual coaching services. To book a call or get more information, email me directly at chrisg@garganoleadership.com or visit our website at garganoleadership.com. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal, have a great week, everybody.